Hi, it's Bea with Crafting Daily Dose, and I'm here with another alternative for the July 2022 paper pumpkin called Sending Good Thoughts. There are 3 card designs, and this month I'm making an interactive version of each one. Today we're concentrating on this design here that has a message in a bottle. And on this card, we have an actual message in the bottle. This panel opens up. You have a cute little message on the inside. That can actually be opened up and read. If you'd like to make this card, stick around and I'll take you through it step by step. This is what we're going to be using for the card. I'm using the Bermuda Bay card base and embossed panel from the kit, and then several of the die cuts. So we've got 2 labels here, a piece of coral, and then the smallest of the bottles. This right here has been cut out from the envelope, and it's a piece that is 3 inches across by 1 1/4 inches in height. You can adjust this to the size of your message. You can make it smaller than this, but I wouldn't make it too much bigger because then you'll have a hard time getting it to fit inside the bottle. And then this is just a scrap of basic white cardstock. We just have a few images to stamp onto this, and then they'll be fussy cut out, so you really don't need very much. And then I'll be using about 8 inches of the linen thread. The key here is that we're going to be using the vintage bottle punch and the corresponding shaker dome. In addition to the Bermuda Bay ink that's included in the kit, I'll also be using Pacific Point. Once you have your supplies, then we're ready to get started. I'm going to start by preparing this label die cut, and I'll rotate it so that this flat edge is on the left. I'll place that at 3 inches, which is right here, and then I'm going to score it. So I'm checking to make sure that I'm using this lighter gray blade, which is for scoring. I don't want to accidentally cut it with the other blade. So you can see that that's going to be scored right near the base of this fishtail. The other thing that I want to do is to mark the center point here. Now this is 2 inches wide, so the middle is going to be right at 1 inch. And I'm going to place it down at 1 inch. And here you can lightly score in the middle of the space, or you can take a pencil or a pen and guide it down into this track. And then just make a mark like that. Now we're going to use this as a guide so that we can center our bottle punch. If you use something here that can be erased, then you can use that punch out for something else. I'm going to go ahead and fold along the score line and then reinforce that with my bone folder. Now I'll use my punch, and if you haven't used these before, you need to slide this latch up. That's going to release it so that you can use it. Now, you might notice that there's not a lot to hang on to here because by the time that you put this in, most of this is going to be covered up by the punch itself. So, I've got a little sticky note and I'm going to attach it on. So I'm using this as a handle, and remember that folded edge is along the bottom there, and I'll guide it in. I'm going to eyeball the placement of this guide that I drew before so that it's about in the center horizontally. I push down to make sure that that fold is all the way down as far as it can go, and now I'm ready to cut. Take your time getting this out because sometimes those pointy ends can get snagged and you don't want to rip your piece. Now my piece is ready for the next step, and I can save the bottle that got punched out if I want to. We have quite a few things to stamp this time, and I'm starting with this label die cut. I'm going to be stamping the Sending Good Thoughts sentiment using Bermuda Bay ink, but I'm not going to center it. I'm going to move it over closer to the right-hand side, and you'll see why when we go to assemble the card. Next is that little piece of the envelope that is going to be the actual message in a bottle. I'm going to be using the white side of it, and I'm going to be stamping on a message. You can also handwrite a message or leave it plain for now until you're ready to use the card, and then you can decide what to put. If you stamp off the edge of your paper, don't forget to clean your space in between. Next, I'm stamping that little textured stamp, and I've got several different places to use it. So the first place is going to be on the inside of the card. I'm going to stamp one along here on the bottom. You can certainly do more if you would like. Now here's that piece that we had cut out. I've gone ahead and unfolded it for right now, and I'm going to stamp a little bit out here in the corner. I unfolded it so that there would not be an uneven edge underneath where the stamp goes. And then finally, I'm going to stamp one on my scrap of basic white cardstock. I'm also stamping out the image of a rolled up message. Now I'm switching over to Pacific Point ink for the seahorse. And before I put that stamp away, I'm also going to use it on the inside of the card. Now I'll use my snips to fussy cut around the images that have been stamped. I'll do rough cuts first and then come back in for more details. Notice that I'm turning the paper around more so than my scissors. To start assembling the card, we're going to begin with the shaker dome. Now, shaker domes are going to have two areas of adhesive. You're going to have some on the front here and then also on the back, and each one is protected by a backing. We want to remove the backing just from the front, from the top here. We're going to leave this backing in place on the back. So I've started to peel it back here, and I'm going to go ahead and place my little opening over that, trying to get everything lined up. And I'm also going to press down here just to kind of preview my placement and check and make sure that I'm happy with it. If I am, then I can go ahead and remove the rest of the backing. And press that down. And now our shaker dome fits perfectly in the opening created by the punch. Next, we're going to take the front panel of our card and adhere it to the card base. I always like to quickly flip this open to make sure that I've got things right side up. Now I want to adhere this down, and it's going to be attached by these little flaps that were originally the fishtail on the banner. So I'm going to tuck those up for now so I can see where I want things to go. I found that it works well if I place this so that the top edge here just barely covers up this top stripe. So it's going to go like this. So let's turn it over, and I'm going to put glue just on those triangles. I'll use my fingers to keep them tucked up in place. And then go ahead and adhere this down. Press down here and give it a chance to set up. Then you can check and make sure that this flap opens nicely. Now the bottle die cut is going to go behind here and is going to get glued onto the card itself. So this part is a little bit tricky because once I put the glue on, I'm basically going to be holding the die cut in place and then gently lowering it down. So take your time with that. So I'm holding it behind the shaker dome so that it looks like it lines up, and then gently let it drop down. Since this is glue, there's time to make a little bit of an adjustment if you need to. Bring that down just a smidge. And if you line up the top of the cork with the top of that stripe, you know that it's going to be covered when this panel gets flipped up. Now the purpose of this funny squiggle shape that we had cut out is that it's going to be a latch that is going to keep this panel closed. So I want to place it down with a dimensional, and I want to have it so that it's just sort of barely catching that corner there. If I shift it over too much, then it's going to be really difficult to open this up, but if there's not enough overlap, then this is just going to swing freely and it's not going to stay closed. So I want to put, I think, a dimensional back here, and then maybe a half of a dimensional behind this space. You can also place this latch at the very top. I like the look of it in this position though, because it offsets the images on the opposite corner. I need the area here to be free so that there's room for this to tuck in. So I'm putting it here, just letting that catch, and let's test it. I'll give you a closer look. Next, I'll work on this banner. Now, it was originally intended for a different card with a landscape orientation so that it would stretch across the wider part of the card. But since we're going to be using it in this direction, you can see that it looks a little bit too long. So what I'm going to do is to cut it right about here. That's the reason why we needed to scoot the sentiment over to the right. Now that we've cut it, we can adjust this position so that it's a little bit shorter. So let's go ahead and start placing it on the card so we have an idea of where it should go. By having some overlap here, we've been able to shorten it. And if we needed to, we could make it even shorter. And then this image is going to cover up that seam. So I'm actually going to cut this piece a little bit shorter. So that the seam is more to the left, and that way I can cover it more easily. And then this is going to go on top like that. Let's make sure that that's a good width. That fits much more nicely than before. With this coral piece, I'm going to cut off the different sections to separate them out. That way I can spread them around and make this bottom part look a little bit more full. So it's kind of like cutting some broccoli. You're kind of looking at the base of all of these branches and giving that a snip. And now I'll play around with arranging them until I find what I like. It's pretty fun, so just play around with it till you're happy with the results. Now, as you go to glue these down, the thing that you want to be careful about is not to put anything on top of here, because you can imagine if you glued it down on top of this, that's going to keep this flap permanently closed, and then you won't be able to get to the message inside. I'm going to glue down the pieces that are attached to my card base, and then the ones that are going to attach to my banner, I will save those because I'm going to pop the whole thing up on some foam. If you've got pieces that hang over the edge, you can trim them off later. There's no need to cover the whole thing. I'm just putting little dots of glue, mostly at the intersections of those branches. For pieces like this, you can glue them down so that they are on top of the inner part here, but again, just don't glue them over the top cover. If there are some areas where you find that you need a little extra glue after the fact, just put some glue on a scrap piece of cardstock, and then you can apply it underneath and press down. Now for these pieces down here by my banner, I'm going to go ahead and attach them directly by gluing them behind the banner. That way when I pop this up on foam, those pieces are going to be elevated too. And I'm going to let parts of it come to the foreground. I'm testing the placement to make sure that I'm not going to see the ends of any of these pieces, and if I am, then I'll make some adjustments. You can use the dimensional foam stickers to elevate this up. I like to use the foam adhesive sheets because I can cut them down to different sizes. So I've cut this into a strip, and that's going to go on the back of here. It's longer than what I need. So that's very easy to trim that off. And this is the same height as the dimensional stickers. So they're interchangeable, and you can use a combination depending on what you need. but this way there's only one backing to peel off. So I've done my best to center it, and I placed it high enough so that these pieces are not going to be off the edge of the card. Speaking of pieces that are off the edge, let's go back and trim these. It's easier to do it from the other side so you can see. Now, as you're arranging these little coral pieces, if you found that you had to scoot things over and you have residual glue in areas, you may find some little sticky spots there. So one way to deal with these is to just use your fingernail to kind of push that in. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm basically pushing that residual glue over, and now there's really not much of a shiny spot like there was before. If you don't have fingernails that you can use the tip of your Take Your Pick tool or something similar, where you're kind of scraping off that sticky area and pushing it over. Another option is to dust on some of the anti-static powder in your embossing body. But for this card, I think the best option is to use some Wink of Stella. This is going to deposit some very fine bits of glitter over your card and just add some shimmer and shine. So any shiny spots are going to look like they were there on purpose. I'm going to go ahead and brush this over the whole area that has coral on it. Now, I know this is not going to show up on camera, but believe me, in person, it really adds a nice touch. Now I'm going to glue on my little seahorse over here on the edge, and I'm only going to glue him to this front cover here. Remember not to glue it to both this and the card base, or else this part won't open. So I'm just putting glue on one side. Just checking to make sure that everything still opens properly. And then the last step is to insert the message. It'll be easier to roll this up if we first loosen the fibers by using the bone folder. So this is similar to when you take curling ribbon. You're just going to scrape it against the edge of your bone folder, and you can see that it's already wanting to curl on its own. And then when you're ready, you can go ahead and start to roll it up. I find it easier to kind of get a looser curl started and then tighten it up. And then bring in your length of linen thread and tie it around. Then just tuck this in. Tuck in the ends of your linen thread, and then tuck this corner underneath the latch. And your card is ready to give. Here's our finished card. We have a little bit of decoration on the inside, and on the front there's all of this texture between the embossed panels and the parts that have been lifted up with foam. There's even a little bit of shimmer, and of course, our actual message in a bottle. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this dose of creativity. If you get a chance to try out the project, I would love to see it, so share it in my Facebook group or tag me if you're sharing elsewhere. If you're interested in Paper Pumpkin but don't yet have a demonstrator, you can find the subscription link as well as all of my other links in the description box below. I hope to see you again next time, and until then, have a great day.